Well, let's dive in. And I'm calling in from California, so it's bright and early for me, about 8 a.m. here. And thanks so much for everyone joining, no matter what time it is, morning, evening, or afternoon. But just as a brief introduction, hopefully you're in the right place. Today we're talking all about the influencer marketing playbook. And the thesis that I'm presenting today is thinking about influencer marketing as a channel of growth, as an extension to and also beyond paid social advertising. So just a brief coverage of what we're going to cover today. I'm going to talk about my own story in launching influencer marketing as a scaled channel of growth before we dive into some of the more foundational concepts around influencer marketing platforms, targeting them, and different ways of working with them. And I'll give a brief overview of this upcoming course that I'm teaching with Reforge before we dive into Q&A. And before we dive in, I actually wanted to start with a brief poll to just better understand your assumptions about how big influencer marketing actually is. So we're going to launch a poll right now. If you could quickly provide a response, what percentage of digital ad spend for 2024, which is estimated to be about $614 billion, do you think is going to be spent on influencer marketing? So make your selection now. Really interesting watching this go live here. All right, just a little bit more, and then we're going to close the poll. All right, fantastic. So we just shared the results and hopefully you're all seeing this. Most of you assume that roughly 20 to 50% of all digital ad budget is going to be spent on influencer marketing. And this is actually really interesting. So the answer is actually 1%. So in 2024, marketing is estimated to be about 7 billion of spend relative to the 614 billion across brand awareness and performance marketing ads. So you may be surprised to hear that number. And the overall opportunity here is that influencer marketing more broadly as a channel is very underpenetrated, even despite its massive potential for reach. Right? If we look at just the social platforms alone, they represent about 5.1 billion users, and which represents about 2/3 of the global population. So you're able to reach a very large portion of the globe through these platforms. On average, people use about 6 to 7 platforms, social platforms per month, meaning that you're going to be able to reach customers across a variety of different interaction surfaces. And lastly, for businesses that have already started to invest in influencer marketing, we see an average of relatively 5 times return on investment. And that puts influencer marketing on par with or better than some of these other paid channels. So broadly speaking, influencer marketing not only presents this massive opportunity for reach, but also relative to other types of performance marketing and digital ad spend is going to be underinvested. And before we dive into today's presentation, just wanted to give you a bit more context around some of my experiences and how I developed this point of view. I've led and built growth teams at companies like Meta, Pinterest, Indiegogo, and most recently at Descript. And today I enjoy teaching in my roles as faculty at UC Berkeley, where I teach growth marketing, and also as a venture investor at IOVC, where I invest in early stage tools. So that's the context in which I'm painting a lot of these perspectives here. And I want to start by diving into my own story on how I turned influencer marketing into my very first scaled channel of growth in my time at Descript. So at Descript, I was the first go-to-market hire and joined at an early stage. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Descript is an all-in-one audio and video editing software. Originally, our customers were podcasters and video editors who would create content and share them on social media platforms or for business purposes, such as in their marketing content. And as you can imagine, a lot of our early customers were content creators who established their own individual presence on platforms like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and much, much more. And one of the unique aspects of our customer base was that people would create content, whether they were podcasts or videos, so that they could share it with their own audiences. And this presented a great opportunity for us to build what was our very first growth loop. When influencers signed up for our platform, when creators signed up for our platform, they would integrate the product naturally into their workflows. And one of the most common types of content that creators cover is workflows. They talk about how they create their videos, how they film their stuff, and also how they record their podcasts. So naturally, talking about their product usage was something that they would organically do. So when they started to use the product, they would create a review or talk about in more broad, in detail, how they would create those videos and mention Descript in that. And often in mentioning Descript, they would backlink to our product. This allowed for Descript to be seen by even more potential creators and users of the product itself. So that distribution would generate views and traffic back to our website. And then the cycle would persist from there. More creators sign up. Some of these are influencers who share to their social media accounts, and this generates even more traffic and views for us. So we had a really early inkling of a growth acquisition loop, and we called it our influencer user-generated content loop. We saw this opportunity and we wanted to incentivize it, meaning that we wanted to repeat this and have this happen even more frequently. So one of the first programs I launched at Descript was a self-service affiliate program. We allowed any influencer, we allowed any content creator who's our customer to sign up and apply for our affiliate program. And by signing up, you would receive 15% recurring commissions on any paid customer that you referred to us. And when we launched this program, we saw the effects that we were hoping for. We saw thousands of applicants and hundreds of creators would post about Descript on social platforms. And this created and generated that flywheel where we saw even more views and even more traffic coming in from these social platforms. The more videos that were created about us, the more likely it was that we actually saw videos go viral or generate a lot of views. And on screen here, we have an example of one of those videos. At the time, Pat Flynn was a podcaster, a vlogger, a course creator, and a multi-creator across many platforms. And Pat created a review video of one of our features that allow for you to create a voice model, a custom voice model, so that you can clone your own voice and use it to edit your content. And when Pat published this video, it generated hundreds of thousands of views, and we were really excited about it. Those views directly translated into results for our business. In fact, if you use a tool like Google Trends, you can see that at the time that the first video was posted, you actually saw the demand for our product just about double. You can see it in Google Trends, and we saw it internally in both our traffic as well as our purchase conversions. We thought that might be the end of it, right? Viral videos have their moment to shine and then they disappear. Well, actually, we were wrong about that because later that year, the topic of voice cloning or text-to-speech technologies became trending on these platforms yet again. And at the time, we saw that the YouTube algorithm in particular picked that video back up, and we continue to see corresponding spikes, not just once, but time and time again. And this is when we realized that viral videos were something that could drive something similar to a scaled, sustainable source of growth for our business. And that's how we decided to double down and invest in more relationships with content creators. And in this case, we decided to cherry pick some of those videos, different from the affiliate model where any content creator could come in and apply to talk about Descript. We would go outbound. We would reach out to potential creators who had the potential to talk about topics that we believed had a chance to go viral. And we replicated this time and time again, and we're able to see massive success and traction as a result of doing this. And this is the story of how Descript did it. But I want to talk a little bit about some of the fundamentals that drove a lot of that decision making. And we're going to start with an introduction to the vast landscape of platforms and different types of influencers to work with out there. The first framing that I want to instill in your minds before we dive into this is to understand overarching opportunity relative to paid social. When you are browsing a platform like TikTok or Instagram, you're going to notice that roughly for every 4 scrolls, the 5th video itself is going to be an ad. So this means that all of the remaining inventory, which is greater than 75% of all available inventory on these content feeds, are going to be organic, right? And the only way to target that organic inventory is going to be through influencer marketing or going directly to the influencers to reach that content. The number of different types of platforms is manifold. You may be familiar, probably more so, with influencers creating videos, but it's more than just that. Starting with more of the visual platforms, we have social networks and visual content feeds. On the network side, we have Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and then we also have more visual image and video content feeds like TikTok, YouTube, and Pinterest. But it doesn't just stop there. We also have platforms for audio content, such as podcasts. And also, we shouldn't forget about text-based content, written content on platforms like Medium, where content is a little bit more longer form, or even X, where content is going to be shorter form. Let's not forget about forums as well. That's a great place for you to be able to influence potential audiences with the credibility of the influencers or the people who are responding to people's questions. And finally, we have reputation management platforms. Platforms like G2 or Capterra or even Yelp, where you trust a lot of the reviews that you see online from influencers who are regularly writing really in-depth reviews about different types of products and services. And depending on your different goals in marketing, whether they're awareness, more oriented around revenue, there's a number of different types of platforms that will correspond to your goals. Just as an example of how you choose those platforms, the most important thing to figure out and ask yourself is, where are your customers going to be spending their time? Right. So just as a quick example here, if you're a B2C company launching a product such as Canva, which is going to be a tool that's highly creative and visual, probably going to be targeting more social networks like Instagram and also social content feeds like a TikTok or a YouTube, where you have much more ability to reach mass consumers and drive mass appeal. On the B2B side, if you're launching a product like Gong, which is going to be more of a sales assistant and tool to analyze your sales calls and optimize them, you're probably going to be targeting more professional networks like LinkedIn, or even written content like Substack, where you can go a little bit more in depth about the experience with the product, and possibly even review sites like G2, where business end users can provide reviews, the most up-to-date reviews about their product experiences. The content format is also something else you need to decide. There's so many different types of content, and for your specific product, you need to figure out how in-depth that content needs to be in order to potentially appeal to your customers. So as an example here, for long-form video, Webflow is a product that is a comprehensive web builder, and it's going to be very challenging to be able to go into depth about its many full features for something that's a little bit shorter. So long form video gives Webflow the opportunity to deep dive into how to use a lot of the features and provide more comprehensive tutorials. So long form content is going to be a better fit for Webflow. Crisp is a product that is a real-time noise cancellation, background noise removal product. And the value proposition is simple enough that you could probably get away with a really short and quick sizzle reel that is posted through short form video platforms like a TikTok or an Instagram. It's going to be far easier to capture attention and convey that message. Additionally, we also have to figure out who are the influencers that we're working with. And when you decide this question, what you're really trying to figure out is, how are you trading off the potential reach, potential engagement from your customers, and how much you want conversions in the short term. There's no standard way to segment influencers, but this is actually a segmentation that I've used at Descript and also across a number of clients that I advise, that I found to be relatively a good starting point from a price benchmarking perspective. And the way that we segment influencers in this methodology is by their potential reach. So starting with the nano influencers, this is going to be creators who have an audience size of 1,000 to 10,000 followers. And generally speaking, the cost to sponsor a post here is going to be roughly around the $500 benchmark USD. And you can take this methodology and extrapolate that across micro influencers, macro influencers, and mega influencers. So broadly speaking, the way that we bucket these categories is we consider nano and micro to be more of the smaller influencers or the emerging influencers. And generally speaking, when we work with these influencers, what we find is that even though the reach may be limited, you're going to see much higher engagement rates because their content is going to be a little bit more niche and targeted to a specific audience. Whereas working with macro and mega influencers, what you're paying for there is a massive potential reach and probably lots of credibility more broadly. But as a result of that broad general reach, you can find that short-term sales conversions can be on the lower end. And oftentimes you can equate working with macro and mega influencers similar to how you invest in brand awareness marketing, which is you're probably not going to see massive short-term spikes or directly attributable sales conversions, but you're going to be able to see those effects over a much longer period of time. So broadly speaking, this is the segmentation of influencers that helps you ballpark generally how much reach do you want, how much you're willing to invest, and potentially some of the sales conversions you see on the back end. And now let's talk a little bit about how you can partner with some of these influencers. You're probably more familiar with the sponsored post model, and I'm going to show you a few other ways that you can think about partnering with them. First things first, I want to talk about how some of these other goals are really important in addition to working with influencers for more direct distribution. Influencers can actually help you with more than just that potential reach. The first area in which influencers are really helpful to partner with is feedback. As influencers, their job is to figure out how to succinctly deliver and capture messages so that their audience can resonate with those videos and the types of content that they create. And so, broadly speaking, influencers are product savvy, meaning that if you're trying to pitch them on your product or your service, they're going to be able to give you great feedback on the overall positioning in a way that you can understand how to best appeal to their audiences. Influencers are also really helpful with improving your conversions. Whether you're paying an influencer to directly utilize the content that they created about your product in your own marketing or working with them to whitelist their profiles, you'll actually see much higher rates of conversion because the content just generally feels much more authentic and organic. And whitelisting is actually a strategy that we heavily used at Descript. So if you're not familiar with it, whitelisting is when you ask a creator to share ad account access with you so that you can spend money to boost videos or boost content on their profiles. So at Descript, instead of promoting, let's say, a video or an ad through the Descript brand account, we would promote it through the accounts of our influencer partners. And this would actually help for us to increase that conversion rates because it was the influencer talking to their audiences directly in their voices. And this is another cool way for you to be able to access that influencer's profile and audiences where you can directly retarget people who've engaged with their content or even create lookalikes upon them. So it's a great way to increase overall conversion rates. And finally, one of the ways in the early days at Descript that I was able to produce a lot of compelling marketing assets at a lower cost was actually by hiring influencers and content creators to produce really authentic user-generated reviews for us. And hiring influencers, oftentimes in the nano or the micro category, allows for you to produce at a cost that's far less than producing these videos in-house. So these are some of the other ways that influencers can you can partner with them. And so, broadly keeping that frame of mind, you can understand that beyond just sponsored posts, there are a number of other types of programs that you can create to really jumpstart influencers as a growth channel for you. Starting with sponsored posts, this is where you have more of a transactional relationship. You pay a sponsorship fee, the influencer creates a video about your product. We also have affiliate programs, which we briefly touched on in my experience at Descript. And this is where you create an open program where influencers can receive commission for generating referrals for your business. Whitelisting ads, we also just briefly talked about running advertising through the influencer social media accounts. Product review programs are also a great way to partner with influencers. If you don't want to sponsor creators upfront, you can give them free product in exchange for their feedback, and there's also a chance that they decide to review your product on their channels thereafter. There's also a way to partner with influencers a level down, which is thinking about them as both feedback partners and also invested members of your team. So influencers can actually invest in your brand. This is something that Descript did in the early days. We had legacy influencers such as I Just Seen and Casey Neistat being investors in the product itself. Also, you can form advisory councils, so allowing influencers to provide more strategic advice on how you might position the product, but also be a really active crew of individuals who can give you a lot of product feedback. And finally, you can also think of influencers as extended members of your team. For instance, hiring them as on screen talent to talk about your products because they're really good behind cameras, or even thinking about them as part of a media roadshow. So, for instance, if you're launching different products, you can think about them as an extension of PR as a channel where you can actually go to these different channels respectively and either conduct interviews or even have them cover different types of launch events. So influencers are more than just ad placements for distribution. There's a number of ways to really deeply partner with them. A few examples of some of these partnership models brought to life. Shopify, for example, has an open application affiliate program. Any creator can go and apply to drive referrals and earn commissions for becoming a Shopify affiliate. And this is a great way for Shopify to continue to drive more user generated content without having to build necessarily direct relationships with every individual. Microsoft, on the other hand, leans more into the product reviews category, where they'll send test products prior to the launch of some of their newest gadgets. And this allows for them to increase their credibility and also reach among tech enthusiasts. Now that we figured out how we can partner with influencers, one of the tricky things on the back end is figuring out across all of these different types of programs, how do we attribute the success or the growth impact of these programs? And in our upcoming course in Reforge, we're going to deep dive into a lot of these methodologies. But today, I want to share with you 4 of the most common measurement methodologies. And they range from a number of qualitative to more directly quantitative forms of measurement. The first one that you've probably seen and experienced yourself is a survey that asks how you heard about us. And one of the choices that you can provide in that survey is letting the user know whether or not you've discovered them through TikTok, YouTube, or even asking them to fill out a direct influencer that they were referred to the product by. You can also observe pre-post lift, which basically means that you compare what happens before the video launch and then what does the data look like afterwards. You can use custom tracking links. These are unique links with some kind of unique referral code or passing in custom parameters that allow for you to track the conversions and sales that come from a specific influencer posting. And finally, you can use customized discount codes. Customized discount codes can be tracked directly at checkout where you count the number of redemptions on that code. Some of these affiliate links for the audiences on the end. But every time these links are interacted with, click on, and traffic comes from these links, you'll attribute these back to the original videos, give credit or credit to the original influencers. Codes are not just to track, but also to give your influencers the ability to drive even more, giving more account for their users as well. So this is actually a great way to not only track, but also increase the number of conversions.
Hey, Sandy. Oh, I think we lost her. So let's give her a minute. Apologies for that. I'm messaging her. Hey, Sandy. Oh, you're on mute right now.
Hey everyone, sorry about that. It's like an internet issue on my end of things here. Hop back in here.
All good. It happens.
Great, thanks so much for perfect. All right, let's see here. Okay, great. So I was about to dive into just some structure around our upcoming course and what to expect there. So we were able to briefly cover an overview around how to think about some of these platforms, influencer segmentation, but we're going to go far more in depth in our upcoming course here. And more specifically, the thing I'm excited about is being able to dive into more of a step by playbook. You can go process of perhaps not having experimented to measure the success of influencer marketing as a and throughout the course you're going to have access to unlimited office hours, be able to book time with me on an open calendar, and also direct questions at me on a Slack. And the course itself is going to take place May 28th and May 30th for the live sessions. As part of that, I've actually spent probably at this point over 100 hours developing supplemental resources across 2 modules and 6 written guides. So hopefully that's also material that you're going to find beneficial to reference even after the course itself ends. And if you're interested, be sure to scan the QR code here or go to the Reforge website and get a little bit more detail around the course itself. Also, a quick preview on some of the deep dive case studies that we're going to have in our live sessions. We're going to have a featured expert, Ben, who was one of the early Notion employees and also the first community and influencer lead. And Ben is going to, in the course, talk a lot about how he was able to partner with micro creators in the early days. And there's an interesting strategy here where when you partner with micro and nano creators, they actually have the opportunity to grow over time. So later on, you're going to have the brand credibility and the reach of partnering with more macro and mega influencers. We're also going to have another featured expert from Carrot Financial. Eric, who's the CEO and co-founder of Carrot Financial, formerly worked on creator products as a product manager at Instagram. And Eric is going to share some of their early strategies on getting macro and mega influencers really excited about sharing posts about Carrot Financial in the early days, even with limited budgets, which was figuring out how they could create a lot of value through billboards in the early days. And so just as a quick summary on today's conversation, I hope that these were some of your takeaways from today's presentation. The first one is that influencer marketing is massively underpenetrated. It's cost effective relative to a lot of the existing performance marketing channels and actually has a lot of potential repeatability depending on the types of partnerships that you have with influencers. When you're figuring out how to start investing, there's actually quite a number of considerations from the platform to the type of partnership model. And there's a lot of room for experimentation here. The only way to figure out what the best fit is going to be experimenting yourself. And finally, if you've only thought about influencers as a way to go viral or just for reach and distribution before, hopefully I've inspired you to think about different ways of partnering with influencers as investors, as advisors, as feedback partners, and even more so as ways to partner together on creating even more assets for your brand. So that was it for today's presentation. And if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, if you have questions about the upcoming course or about influencer marketing more broadly, definitely connect with me there. And today we're going to dive into Q&A. Thanks so much. I'm going to pull up our Q&A questions here today. Starting with the most asked question, Hillary asks, can you talk about the platform you use to enable your affiliate program? Yes, definitely. So in the early days, we wanted to use something that was more cost effective and nimble, and we use a tool called LinkMink. There's actually a number of other tools out there that will allow for you to host an affiliate program. When you're searching for affiliate programs, I would say that there's generally kind of a few criteria that you should look for. The first one is that the cost across platforms looks really different. So with LinkMink, one of the reasons that we chose it was they had a flat monthly fee, which was about $250 per month. There's a number of other tools out there that are actually going to charge you per transaction. So imagine that every time a referral sends a converting purchase back to your product, they may charge you a certain percentage of that sale that you drove. And we didn't necessarily feel like that was fair or manage the economics of what we were trying to achieve there. So we use a tool called LinkMink. There's a number of other tools out there. You can look at tools like Rewardful, Impact, and First Promoter, just to name a few of them. But if you broadly look at some of these names, you're going to be able to find even more recommendations as well. Hillary, I hope that answered your question. Moving on to the next question here, we have a question from Corey. Have you seen the usage of paid partnership disclosures impact the ability of a video to go viral? I don't quite know what you mean by that, Corey. Do you want to extrapolate here? Or if you're still in the audience.
Give me 1 second. I'll give Corey access to unmute himself. This is the limitations of Zoom. Give me 1 second. Okay, Corey, if you want to come off mute, you can talk.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, Corey.
Just yeah, so what I've seen a lot of, at least on our end, is when an affiliate or an influencer uses like the hashtag paid partnership or paid, I'm seeing what seems to be TikTok, YouTube, Instagram docking the organic reach of that video because they can tell that it's sponsored content. And I'm just curious if you saw that or if others are seeing that as well.
You know what's interesting? We have not seen that. In fact, some of our most viral videos actually have a paid partnership tag on them. I'll give you an example. In the early days, we used to have a strategy of partnering with nano and micro influencers, primarily because they were cost effective. But we were almost placing bets on a lot of these creators with really fast growing channels in hopes that they would essentially become, much larger creators over time. And in the early days when we did this, we had a lot of the paid partnership tags on these posts, and they were still able to generate millions of views and ultimately, lots of traffic and engagement as well. So in my experience, I have not seen this negatively impact the ability to go viral.
Got it. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Let's move on to our next question here from Henry. Do you think that there could be influencer marketing fatigue for the consumers? That's a great question. Most certainly, yes. Most certainly, yes. I think it's indeterminate on how to determine this impact. I think one of the things you can really bet on with how platform providers are creating their algorithms is they're doing a lot of that job on spreading out that fatigue for us. So, for example, with platforms like, let's talk about TikTok, right? There's definitely a what I call the TikTokification effect, where the more you engage with a certain topic, the more types of content TikTok is going to want to show you about that topic, right? But at the same time, they're doing their best to kind of show you the bleeding edges of other new video topics so that they can get you hooked onto other types of videos as well and maximize your time spent on the platform. And so instead of you having to worry about, are we in a category or a topic that users are fatigued about, I think for the most part, you can let the platform algorithms drive a lot of that spreading out of that fatigue for you. So I think broadly speaking, that's probably the first layer of defense on thinking about how to manage that fatigue, and probably something that I wouldn't necessarily worry about in the onset in the earlier days. I think unless you're maybe like an example of where fatigue is just like overdone. There was originally a VPN product that used to sponsor any and every creator. You probably know what I'm talking about. So anytime you watched a video, you would see this VPN being promoted. There was definitely some fatigue there because you would just skip past that ad at some point. But I think that over time they've realized that they've probably saturated their audience. So I think it's a little bit more in their case a matter of where did your audience get saturated relative to your potential reach on a platform rather than influencer marketing fatigue. I think we didn't get to cover a lot of the stats today, but the influencer marketing and hearing about products from influencers is actually the preferred mode of shopping for a lot of consumers today. So I think if anything, people want even more of that natural integration of products and services to organic content. Hope that answered your question, Henry. Moving on to our next question here, Amanda. How should brands that currently operate in just a handful of markets think about influencer strategy? Amanda, that's actually a great question. So I'll answer this with a broad stroke and then a more specific example. So the broad stroke is actually relying on a similar strategy to the one that we talked about in regards to influencer marketing fatigue. And that's that actually a lot of these platforms are really good at zoning in on specific interests and properties of users that are watching these videos. So for instance, I'll just assume for a second here that perhaps markets wise, you are available in specific geographies and markets to start with. When you create content and you're able to tag that content as being location based, the people who interact with it, generally speaking, are going to be people who find that location relevant. And so by creating that data feedback loop, oftentimes, more often than not, these other algorithms are going to do a pretty good job of essentially narrowing that audience for you and pretty much only redistributing it to people who are interested in that specific location. So that's one of ways, like first layer of defense there. The second way to combat that is going to be by actually targeting influencers with impact in specific markets. And this is actually one of the important filters that you can use when you're using a number of different types of influencer databases, or even if you're conducting platform search yourself, you can actually add specific types of geography tags or find an influencer who perhaps has the most impact within a specific market. So with those two combined, I think broadly speaking, you can actually just find the handful of influencers within the markets that you care about. Hope that answered your question, Amanda. Moving on to our next question here from Boris. What metrics next to audience size do you look for when finding influencers to collaborate with? Do you ask them for reach, likes, and or any other metrics to try and extrapolate the engagement rate? This is actually going to be something that we comprehensively cover in our upcoming course, Boris. But as kind of high level metrics to care about, one of the most important ones to gauge is recent engagement rate. And you want to find that engagement rate on the topical relational videos that are going to be much more related to your brand. So actually, I'll just give you an example, right? If you're going to be working with, let's say, an influencer with sizable reach, there's probably two things you want to do in your research. The first one is you want to filter on their most recent videos, let's say 3 to 6 videos, and look at what the average view count and also engagement rates on that content look like. The reason that this is important is because over time, as influencers start to increase their follower counts and their viewership, they oftentimes make quite a number of topical pivots, meaning that maybe they originally started and they were, let's say, primarily covering product reviews. Over time, maybe they evolved more into lifestyle content. If, for example, you sponsor them for a product review, the average engagement that you get on that content is going to look very different than the rest of their channel. So you really need to see, in terms of recency, what some of those engagement metrics look like. Just as kind of like a broad benchmark to start with, somewhere between 3 to 4% of views as either comments, reshares, or likes is probably something that's pretty healthy and probably something that you're shooting for. And then also the other thing you want to look for is the average performance on similar types of content, right? This is something that we're going to cover in the course, but when you look at a creator's profiles and socials, you're going to see that they're more often than not active on multiple platforms. So if they have a YouTube account, they're probably also posting to Instagram and also posting to TikTok. And so when you're looking across all of those different platforms, you need to look at, let's say that you decide to partner with them for a product review. You want to look at, for across all these different platforms, for product reviews specifically, what is that average engagement rate and what are some of the average view counts? So combining both of these views, recency as well as topical categories, you're going to be able to determine whether or not this influencer is worth targeting. Boris, hope that answers your question. Take a few more quick ones here. Maya asks, why with macro influencers we'll see the results in a long time? Maya, that's a good question. So there's really two trends at play here. The first one is that macro influencers with large followings, let's say that they have a subscriber count or a follower count of 1 million, generally speaking, have a pretty broad audience set. So if you have a product that's targeting a very specific use case and you don't have a mass consumer product, hypothetically, let's say you offer a tool for businesses, you're going to find that your content is generally not as resonant with their audience as, say, targeting a macro influencer whose primary topic that they cover is going to be B2B tools. So generally speaking, when you work with macro influencers, you're going to see really large vanity numbers, like lots of views, perhaps lots of engagement and comments, but those are fans of the creator themselves, not necessarily of your product or service. So when you're using some of those measurement methodologies that we took a brief look at, whether it's asking them, how did you hear about the product, or even directly measuring clicks from links, you're going to find that the number of clicks directly from these videos is actually going to be pretty small in the short term. And again, it has to do with how broad and vast the interests of that audience are. Now, the numbers here may change over time. So if you were to, let's say, extend that measurement window to 6 months or even a year, you might see that trickle effect where, like in the example of the Pat Flynn video, where the viral video actually went viral multiple times, you can see that uptick over time. And that brand awareness, influence, and impact may be the first touch or the first time they heard about you, but because they now recollect your product over time, they may search for you on Google Ads, or when you remarket to them over time, they may convert down the line. So I would think of working with macro influencers similar to how you think about brand performance channels, which is a much longer horizon and window for measuring that impact, but also broadly understanding that the audience is so general that you may not be able to convert them in the short term. I hope that answers your question. Take a few more here. Felipe asks, how common is that influencers will allow you to access their accounts to promote the content? Great question. We've had 100% success on this actually. And there's actually a few shared incentives here that make that the case. The first one is that when you ask the influencer for ad account access, you're basically promising them that you're going to spend money to boost their profiles and help them grow their follower count, right? You're basically saying, I'm going to help you distribute your video to even more people. And so there's a double win there. And so more often than not, influencers are excited about the idea of a brand spending money to help them promote their content. The second thing I want to add there is that usually whitelisting ads, not always, but oftentimes they can be contracted as part of the sponsorship deals. So you can ask them for whitelisting access for a certain period of time. The creator has full control here because they're the ad account owner, they're the profile owner. They can give you limited access to a lot of things, including access to seeing certain types of data or being able to control that ad account over time. So as an example, the most commonly negotiated whitelisting duration for us was probably 3 months, where we would say, we'll spend $5,000, $10,000 to boost this video, but you can revoke our advertiser access 3 months later, or we'll figure it out on an ad hoc renewal basis. So I think because of both the control as well as that dual incentive for they're going to grow alongside us, generally speaking, we found that influencers are much more likely to say yes than no. Awesome. And I know we're at time here. Let me see if I can answer one quick last one here. What's the difference between sponsored posts and whitelisted ads? Let's see. Yes, Corey did a great job responding there. So hopefully you got your question answered. Awesome. I think that's all the time that we have for today. Want to really thank you all for your time today. Hopefully the Q&A was useful as well. And again, don't hesitate to connect with me if I can answer more of your in-depth questions about your own business. So thanks so much for your time, and I'll see you on the other side.